So here's a big question for you. Can an AI, an entity that has access to pretty much all of human knowledge, actually discover something brand new? And I don't mean just remixing what it already knows. I mean generating a genuinely novel idea, a real, true breakthrough. Let's dive into that because it gets right to the heart of what creativity and discovery even are.
And this is the exact challenge that kicked off a really fascinating conversation. A human actually posed this question directly to an advanced AI. It just cuts right through all the hype, right? It's a simple but really profound question that kind of forces us to rethink what the limits of artificial intelligence actually are.
The AI's response wasn't just a simple yes or no. Instead, what followed was this incredible dialogue that explored what it even means to create something new in the first place. So today, we're going to walk right through that conversation.
Okay, so first things first. Before we can even try to get an answer, we have to agree on what we're talking about. What do we actually mean when we say new knowledge? Is it just about connecting old ideas in a new way, or is it something more?
This is where it gets really interesting. On the one hand, you've got knowledge synthesis. This is all about intelligently recombining things that already exist, like, say, taking ideas from immunology and nanoparticle engineering to create a totally new therapy. But on the other hand, you have true novelty, something genuinely unprecedented, something that seems to come out of nowhere. And the big question is, can an AI actually cross that gap?
And what's wild is that the AI itself came up with a framework for this. It actually sorted new knowledge into three different buckets. First, there's combinatorial, which is kind of like being a brilliant matchmaker for ideas that are already out there. Second, you've got predictive, which is using what we already know to map out what we could know. And third, the holy grail, generative discovery, basically creating something from seemingly nothing. This is just such a brilliant way to think about that second category, predictive extrapolation. Think about it. The math that predicted black holes would exist, or the equations that described how fissile material would behave, that wasn't just describing reality as it was. It was creating a map to a place no one had ever been. It revealed what could be real.
But not all discoveries follow a neat and tidy map. Some of them are just happy accidents. And that brings us to the unique and maybe irreplaceable role of the human mind, that messy, unpredictable spark of our own insight.
Right, this is the classic example. You've got the physicist Richard Feynman. He wasn't in a lab trying to solve quantum electrodynamics while he was watching a spinning plate. He was just playing. He was bored. And in that moment of just idle curiosity, his brain made this bizarre, totally non-obvious leap that somehow connected the wobble of that plate to the quantum world.
And that right there is the crucial difference, isn't it? The AIs we have now are directed. They solve the problems we give them. They don't get bored and wander off and have a sudden random insight about a spinning plate in a cafeteria. So the really big question is, could you ever program an AI to have its own Feynman moment? And this leads to a really fascinating idea. What if you could build an AI with an unconscious? A kind of background process that's always running, always making these random associations, almost like daydreaming. It could develop a kind of intuition, that feeling that a certain connection matters, even if it can't explain why just yet.
Okay, enough philosophy. Let's ground all this in reality. All this talk about discovery is great, but what does it actually look like in a lab? We're about to look at a real-world example that puts these very ideas to the test.
So let's talk about this. An experimental cancer vaccine from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. What makes it such a perfect case study for our question is how it so elegantly combines a bunch of existing ideas into something that is powerfully new. So let's break down what makes this thing so clever. First, they engineered this special nanoparticle that acts as a super adjuvant. Now, an adjuvant is just something that boosts your immune response. This thing basically acts like a megaphone, screaming at the immune system to pay attention. Second, it gives systemic protection, which helps prevent the cancer from spreading. That's metastasis, which is so often what's fatal. And third, it's a flexible platform. It can be personalized using a patient's own killed tumor cells. And the results in the mouse models are just, well, they're stark. I mean, look at this. In the group with melanoma that got the vaccine, 80% were still tumor-free for the whole study. And in the control group, 100% of them died within 35 days. There is absolutely no ambiguity there. The data just speaks for itself.
This was the human observer's reaction when reading the research. And it gets to such a crucial point about science today. In a world full of hype, the tone of this paper just felt different. It felt sober, confident. It just let the data do all the talking. And here's why that feeling is totally justified. Here is why it feels so credible. It completely avoids misleading metrics. For instance, you'll see some fusion research boasting about hitting millions of degrees of temperature. Sounds amazing, right? But they might not mention it's happening in a near vacuum. So it's technically true, but it's not the whole story. This vaccine paper, though, it focuses only on what really matters, a binary outcome. Did the mice live or did they die? It's that simple. So what does all this mean when we put it together? The philosophical chat about AI and this very concrete example from the vaccine lab, they both seem to be pointing to a totally new model for how we discover things. So where does this vaccine fit into that framework we talked about? Well, it isn't generative discovery pulled from a void. It's a perfect real-world example of that first category we discussed, combinatorial novelty. The researchers brilliantly connected existing knowledge from completely different fields, nanoparticle engineering, cancer immunology, chemistry, to create something with these new life-saving capabilities. And this is where their strategy becomes just as impressive as their science. They're targeting 3 key cancers for human trials, and each one for a very specific reason. Melanoma, because it's known to have immune responses, pancreatic cancer, because it is just brutally difficult to treat, and triple-negative breast cancer, because there's such a high unmet need. It's just a smart, focused approach designed to prove the tech and get it to the patients who need it most. So the real takeaway here isn't about whether a human or an AI is better at discovery. That's the wrong way to look at it. The real future, it seems, is a partnership. Humans provide the spark, that playful intuition, the real-world experiments, the wisdom to ask the right questions. The AI provides the scale, the ability to instantly synthesize all known data and see connections a single human mind could never, ever see. And that leaves us with this final thought. We've seen the power of human combinatorial novelty in the lab. We've imagined an AI with a creative unconscious. So what happens when you put them together? What breakthroughs become possible when that Feynman-like intuition is amplified by an AI that can instantly see every possible connection across every field of human knowledge? Now that is a future worth discovering.